Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Shreya. We have our returning guest Kumar Bala, Balasubramaniam, SK Balasubramaniam, and we both are going to discuss about what language should we teach our children so that they have the best comprehension skills, whether it is science or math or social studies or any facet of life. Let's welcome Kumar Bala. Kumar, namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel. How are you?
Namaskaram, Sriji, and Vanakkam as well. It's good to be back on Pigurus.
And I'm very sorry to have woken you up so early. You are in United Kingdom. It's early in the morning there, and we decided that this is an important topic that needs to be discussed right away. So Kumar has put together a very nice presentation. With your permission, I'm going to start it so you can start talking to that. Over to you.
Thank you, Sriji. Before we start, I would like to sort of start with a prayer to Goddess Saraswati, because we're going to talk about languages and education and wisdom and knowledge, right? So in Tamil Nadu, at least, when kids start school, they start with the Saraswati Namastubhyam, Varate Kamarupini, Vidyarambam Karishyami, Siddhir Bhavatume Sada. You basically asking for the blessings of Goddess Saraswati before you go on the pursuit of attaining wisdom and knowledge, right? So this is a tradition that's gone for thousands of years in India, and it's a good way to start any conversation. I would have loved to have this conversation in one of the Indian languages. So I see the irony of having a conversation about languages, about Indian languages, and the importance of teaching our children in our own language in a foreign tongue. So the irony doesn't wash over me, and it's something that we need to sort of deal with to begin with. I mean, given the nature of the situation and where we are at the moment, to use English as a link language just for communications is all we can do at the moment. நானும் ஸ்ரீஜியும் தமிழ்ல எத்தனையோ நாள் பேசியிருக்கோம். ஆனா தமிழ்ல பேசினா மற்ற இந்தியாவில் இருக்க மற்ற மக்களுக்கு புரியாது. I would have loved to have this conversation in Sanskrit. I studied Sanskrit at school. Aham Sanskritena etat sambhashanam kartum ichami. I would have preferred to have this conversation in classical Tamil or Sanskrit, but unfortunately we are where we are. So the Shriji and I have talked about this for a while, and this is something that has sort of bothered me for a long time. I used to live in Europe, and Europe has the same sort of linguistic diversity as India does. Europe is about 500 million people. India is 1.4 billion people. The amount of languages you have in Europe are comparable to the amount of languages we have in India, about 18 official languages and about 1,600 spoken languages of different kinds and mother tongues, right? So that is what India is. And Europe is also very linguistically diverse. Two major linguistic groups, the Proto-Indo-European group and the non-Proto-Indo-European groups like the Finnish language, etc. But what makes Europe different to India is that Europeans take their mother tongue seriously. Italians will never teach their kids in primary school in English. Germans will never do that. The French will never do that. And I recently had a conversation with the dean of mathematics at University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, where the population is only 2 million people. They still teach their young minds in Slovene. Slovenia is a former part of Yugoslavia. Almost all the Yugoslavian countries stick to their language, however small they may be. They stick to their mother tongue, which means the Slovenian government invests a lot of money in translating all the new scientific documents, all the new publications that are made all around the world into Slovene. There's an interesting statistics I read somewhere that Spain translates more to Spanish in a year than the entire Arabic world has done in 200 years. So that is how much effort Europeans put in to preserve their mother tongue. Whereas if you look at India, for a long time, we've done lip service to protecting our mother tongue. But in reality, we haven't done anything at all. We haven't held our governments, both central and state, accountable. Particularly, I see this more of a problem in the south than in the north, and I'll explain why that is the case. Shriji, if you could.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, the next slide, please. So we are a civilizational state, and we have deep linguistic and literary culture, but we still are enslaved to the colonial tongue. Why is that? Why is that English still dominates most of our discourse? Most of our elites prefer to use English than to use their own mother tongue. Particularly, national leaders are mocked for not being able to speak in English, which is which makes no sense at all. Being able to speak eloquently in your mother tongue shows a high level of intellectual depth and intellectual rigor, and a high level of self confidence as well. But we would rather try and ape a foreign language because that somehow is the way to way to show off our intelligence, right? So this has led to a huge amount of identity crisis. A lot of Indians then do not have the confidence to put forward their ideas because they're not. It is not their mother tongue, and it is not what their culture is rooted in. So they end up in this sort of identity crisis, not just in India. Even when they move out of India, you see the same problem. That is why you see a lot of Indians who move to the West try and fake the accent, right? So why do you have to fake the accent? You never see an Irishman moving to Australia trying to fake an Australian accent. Or you would never see a German moving to Britain trying to fake a British accent. They wouldn't. They would just speak with whatever accent that they feel comfortable with, right? So, but Indians tend to have that identity crisis, and we need to face that reality and have a solution now. This is something that I really want people to people want think about. There has in the last 10,000 years of human history, no nation or no civilization has attained greatness by using a foreign language. Not a single example. Every single of great nation states, from Athens to Rome, to Persia, to India, to China, to modern day Dutch and the Portuguese and the British and the French and the Americans, they've always done it in their mother tongue. You cannot, and then of course the Chinese and the Japanese as well. Every advanced nation or any large nation have used their mother tongue to get to greatness. The only exception people always pull up is Singapore, but Singapore is the only exception, being such a tiny state of mixed ethnicities. They don't really have a single mother tongue. Malay could be comparable, but then you also have Chinese speakers and Tamil speakers in Singapore. So Singapore is too small a country to compare to a nation state the size of India, right? So there hasn't been a single nation that attained greatness without using their mother tongue. So why is that the case? When I told a group of pedagogical researchers in Germany that we still teach our, not all, but most parents would love to teach their kids their primary education in English, they gasped in surprise and shock, because the main primary aim of a primary school education is for allowing the child to explore the world around him or her in a way that internalizes the various concepts that we want them to learn, right? Be it mathematics, be it language, be it history, be it culture, be it geography, be it science. It is about teaching the child the world around it. This isn't a very domain specific thing that you would teach a child at a primary level. At a primary level, all you're aiming to do is to give the child the tools that they can learn to understand the fundamentals of how the world works, how mathematics works, how science works. So imagine a world where a 5 or 6 year old child learns everything about complex concepts that they're being exposed to for the first time in English. They go home, they cannot have the conversation with their mom and dads, they can't have their conversations with their aunts and uncles or their grandparents. So they end up only way to succeed in an environment is just memorizing, regurgitating, and memorizing and regurgitating. So what that meant is, over time, Indians have become far less creative and far less productive than the previous generations. And I've discussed that with Sriji quite a bit. I think I'm the intermediate generation where we were taught everything in English, but our teachers learned everything in their mother tongue, right? So I had teachers who learned everything in Hindi, or I had teachers who learned everything in Tamil. They used English as a tool to convey those information to us, but they still had the first principle understanding, and they still internalized various concepts, right? Like even basic concepts like inertia. Why would a child in India innately understand what an inertia is if it is a word that's alien to her? We must be focusing on using our own words that are culturally relevant. So primary school kids can then internalize it, and form that fundamental strong basis before they go on to learn more concept subjects in their secondary and tertiary education, right? So this is where we need to aim for. So this is where the national educational policy is really important, that the primary school education, by that I'm not saying just one subject needs to be your mother tongue, but every subject needs to be in your mother tongue. If you're living in Karnataka, it has to be in Kannada. If you're living in Orissa, it has to be in Oriyan. If you're living in Rajasthan, it has to be in Hindi. If you're living in Maharashtra, it should be in Marathi. If it's in Tamil Nadu, it should be in Tamil. But what we have done is a broad majority of us, particularly in the southern India, have started learning everything in English, which means we are going to be creating a generation of butlers and clerks who can memorize and regurgitate rather than think in first principles. Ask ourselves this question. In the early part of the 20th century, we created great minds like Ramanujan, Bose, Satyendranath Bose, Sir C.V. Raman, Subramaniam Chandrasekhar. But why has it stopped? I believe fundamentally the every subsequent generation did not internalize these concepts like they did before. Like both Sri and I come from electronics background. We both come from semiconductor industry, right? I personally feel having worked with both generations, Sri generation. Sorry, Sri, if I'm, I'm aging you here, but and the generation after me, I can clearly see the previous generation had a really good understanding of first principles in electronics, in the way why things work and how things work. Whereas the generation after me tend to have better command of the language but less grasp of the domain concepts. And I think that is fundamentally because we are teaching really complex subjects at a young age, like particularly primary school, in an alien language, a language that they can never relate to because it is not rooted in their civilizational ethos. So it is a problem we need to address. So all the angst you see amongst various southern linguistic groups in their languages dying is this outburst. They know that their language is dying, but they're picking on the wrong target. It is not Hindi that is destroying their mother tongue. It is our own mistake. Post independence, our own inferiority complex in forcing our children to learn in a foreign language is slowly destroying our own languages and eventually will cause the extinction of these languages. Shiji, next slide, please.
Yeah.
So decline of languages, right? This is a really interesting and fascinating subject. If you talk to people who have done a lot of research in linguistics, they'll tell you when a language stops dying. A language stops dying. A language is a living thing, like anything else. It has to evolve over time. New ideas and new concepts come to the fore, so they need to have words in it. If you don't have new words created in your language for new ideas and new concepts, you are forced to use a foreign word for it. Like, for example, a USB or a camera or a video. You will really notice when you speak Tamils speak to each other, the younger the Tamils are, the more English words they will use while they're conversing in English. Let's assume that Sri's generation used 5% of English words in their everyday parlance because they couldn't have a native Tamil word for it. My generation would have used 10 to 20%. The next generation would have used 30 to 40%. And at what time does Tamil stops being Tamil and becomes a completely different language? Because your language now is 80% a foreign language. The most I've talked to Sriji and a lot of people about this. This thing sort of slapped me in my face when I was in Coimbatore recently. I was in a mall in Coimbatore, and they had boards for each floor, and this is unbelievable that the first floor and in Tamil text they've written as Parast floor because we don't have the F and the half sound in Tamil. So instead of writing Mudal Talam, which would be Mudal would be first, Talam would be the floor, they've written Parast floor. From the airport in Chennai all the way to T Nagar or Anna Nagar, count the number of shops where you can see name boards which at least have a Tamil subtext. I'm not even saying put the name boards in Tamil, but even the subtext in Tamil. So they'll have a large English name board. Even the subtext have been removed. Every shop from the airport to the central Chennai will always you will see that maybe 1%. If you'll be surprised if the primary font is in Tamil and the secondary font is in English. And this is a state that where the Dravidian parties came to power in 1967, on the grounds of linguistic nationalism, right? On the grounds that they were going to protect their language. But here is the capital city of that state. You drive from the airport to the center of the city, every single thing is written in English, and they blame Hindi for imposition. Sorry, Sriji, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So a couple of observations along the same lines as what you said. You have a medical shop, like a pharmaceutical shop, right? If you go in Tamil Nadu, for the most part, they will write it as pharmacy. But then in pharmacy, there used to be a letter for half, and EVR, the guy that they call Periyar, he removed that, saying that this is a Sanskrit imposition. So now what it is it is Barmasi. Only those who contextually can contextualize it, then say, oh, okay, this is pharmacy. But see, you're totally wrong in depicting what the story is. Why can't they say something which is more appropriate in original Tamil? I'm talking about the signage in Tamil. The English sign says XYZ pharmacy or
Indeed.
medicals. Medical also is written as medical in Tamil.
Indeed. It is, and they write it as medical shop rather than writing it as Marundu Kadai. It is, the situation is same in Coimbatore as well. Coimbatore is getting to the same level of English dominance that you're seeing in Chennai. The other cities in Tamil Nadu are slightly better, like Madurai and Tanjavur still have a prominent Tamil boards. And if you go to the northern states, I like to travel in the north of India to see how the linguistic traditions are kept alive, right? So if you go to a city like Jaipur, you would see 80 to 90% of the shops still have the primary fonts in Hindi and the secondary in English. And that shows a level of self-confidence in their own mother tongue, right? I'm not even writing Marundukadai and writing it as medical shop and sometimes pharmacy, which doesn't even make sense because it is not even an English word. At that point, it becomes a Latin word. And you're trying to, the ironic thing about Europe is some people call it pharmacy, which is the Latin word, and some countries like Germany use apotheke, which is the Greek word. So the ones who primarily see Greek as the origin of their languages will still use apotheke, whereas the ones who see Latin as their things would call it pharmacy. I don't know why Indians, particularly Tamils, have to call it pharmacy. What, we couldn't even write it as medical shop or Marundukadai or even in Sanskrit, but we have to write it in a foreign tongue. That too, not even English. It go all the way to Latin, and that is the level of lack of self-confidence we've got to. Right? Sorry, go ahead, Fiji.
When I was growing up as a kid, a few decades back, in rural Andhra, the medical shop used to be written properly as XYZ Aushadhalayam. Pure. It is. See, Telugu is 80% Sanskrit. Even today, more or less, Telugu is still got a little less about contamination, although it is growing just like other languages. That is no longer there. Same shape, same story there also now. Medical is medical in Telugu. they don't want to say Aushadhalayam.
See, we both are Tamils. Our ancestors, we can trace our ancestors for hundreds or if not thousands of years from the land of Tamil Nadu. And both of us are named in Sanskrit. Like Bala Subramanian, Brahman is a Sanskrit word, Bala is a Sanskrit word as well, and Sri is a Sanskrit word as well. So this idea that somehow Sanskrit is alien to us doesn't make sense. Sanskrit and Tamil are two classical language of a civilization. Like how Europe has Latin and Greek, we have classical Tamil and Sanskrit. What is so difficult in accepting that fact? Why all this linguistic antagonism is something that I never understand. You never see Europeans having this petty fight of whether Greek is superior to Latin or Latin is superior to Greek. The only context in which they do that is in a scholarly context, right? So, like there was a really interesting debate between Mary Beard and Boris Johnson. You can look it up. Boris Johnson being supporting the Greeks and Mary Beard, the Cambridge historian, supporting the Romans on which civilization and which language is superior or that. But that is a very academic, jovial context. They don't have this petty fights like we have in Kannada and Karnataka and in Tamil Nadu, where the linguistic chauvinism really shows its ugly face. And before we move on to the next slide, I just want people to be aware of that languages can die a sudden death. A perfect example would be Sicilian. Sicilian, the language that has been in survival for 3,000 years, is slowly dying at the hands of Italian, right? So the Sicilians, I had this conversation with the Sicilian mother, and I was asking, well, how fluent are you in Sicilian? She said, I'm fluent. I can write. I can speak in Sicilian. And how fluent are you, your kids? She said, well, they're okay, but they're not. But they don't use Sicilian that much. But their grandparents only speak Sicilian. They would not accept Italian as the language, right? But Sicilian, if not protected, will die within a generation. What This is the key point. If the Kannadikas, the Telugu speakers, the Tamil speakers, and the Malayalam speakers don't correct ourselves now, our languages would be dead within 2 generations. That's 70 years. This is where we are heading to. And it won't die because of Hindi. It won't die because of the Hindu nationalism. It will die mainly because we elected public officials who do not understand linguistics. Sorry, the next one. Oh, the case for a
So,
national language. So,
yeah.
what should be our link language? Should our link language stay as English, or do we need a civilizational language? My case for it is that we need a civilizational language, which to me is a Sanskritized Hindi. Sanskritized Hindi serves a great purpose in unifying us. A perfect example would be if you look at the word for a book, it pustak or pustakam. In Tamil, it will be puttakam. In a lot of Indian languages, it would be very similar. And if you look at what morning is, it's Suprabhadam, Suprabhat, Suprabodh. And even in Tamil, the Suprabhadam used to be until 18th century a common word. When you say good morning, it's a Suprabhadam, right? So a lot of namaskar, namaskaram, a lot of the northern languages and southern languages share a lot of patni, for example, is a common word in both Sanskrit and in Tamil. A lot of words are shared between the Sanskrit branch of the language and the Tamil branch of the languages, or the Dravidian branch of the languages. So it makes sense to have a Sanskritized Hindi as the national language. One of the oppositions that after independence that the southern states had towards Hindi was not because it was Hindi, but it was because it was a fat Hindi. By what I mean by that, it had a huge influence of Farsi, Arabic, and Turkic. So, for example, salam or aurat or kitab. Why would a Tamil drop the word of using puttakam or pustak, which is indigenous to our civilization, and suddenly start using kitab? So, if we come up with a Sanskritized Hindi as the national link language, and we start teaching our kids our secondary education a few subjects in that national language, so that the mother tongue serves the primary basis of primary education, then and the Sanskritized Hindi comes in and becomes the link language, and then English becomes the tool. English becomes a tool when we want to deal with the external world. And one of the common arguments that people say is, well, what do we do about jobs? Which is a ridiculous argument. What do Japanese do about the jobs? What do South Koreans do about the jobs? What do Chinese do about the jobs? What do Germans? What do the Finns? What do the Swedes? What do the Norwegians or the Italians or the Spanish do for the jobs? They don't need to learn English, or Germans. They don't need to learn English to have an industry or to have an economy. It'll be ridiculous to go to a South Korean and say you can't have a high-tech economy if you don't teach your kids in English. They'll laugh. They'll laugh it off. You can't even go to Slovenians. If you go to Slovenia, a country of just 2 million people, 2 billion, they do everything in Slovene. The government spends so much money in translating every scientific literature to Slovene. 70 million Tamils can't do that. Equal number of Kannadikas can't do that. Equal number of Marathis can't do that. Bengalis can't do that. Punjabis can't do that. Why do we end up in the situation where this ridiculous argument that, oh, we can't have an economy or jobs if we can't speak English?
Yeah, go ahead.
So English has now transitioned. Well, it was in the making, right? So English was the language of the civil servants and the civil service, everything to do with India, all the administrators, as they call it. We transitioned from a government of white sahibs to a government of brown sahibs, right? For the first few decades of our independence. These were the children of Macaulay, Thomas Babington Macaulay, in his famous educational memo on how to teach Indians. He famously proclaimed that a single shelf in a preparatory school in rural England has more value than the entire works in Sanskrit and Tamil and all the native literatures of India, right? As a parent of a child who goes to an elite preparatory school in England, I can tell you that's not the case. A single era of Sanskrit or Tamil literature has more value than the entire European corpus of literature. By that I mean the Greeks, the Latins, the English, the French, the Italians, the Germans. to put it in perspective, Mahabharata is 18 times larger than Homer's Iliad. Homer's Iliad is the largest Western epic. And of course, it is of immense value to Europeans and to the world. But Mahabharata alone is 18 times larger than that. When Macaulay said that, he has not visited India, he has not learned any of the Indian languages, but here was an Englishman wanting to educate the uncivilized barbarians, claiming that a single preparatory school library has more books than the corpus of 4,000 years of great literature of multiple Indian languages. And that is the educational policy we still use, right? So he wanted to create a class of a small group of brown skinned Indians who will be brown outside, but would, in every other aspect of life, they would think of themselves as English. And the archetypal person that comes to my mind is Jawaharlal Nehru. That was the person that Macaulay wanted to create. That we will create this small elite group of people who will speak in English, and they will administer these millions who will speak a different language. So that is the education system we've left with. So we've left with a rigid caste system of elites using English. Everybody else had to use a different language. And what that meant was the middle classes aspired to be the elites, so they started teaching their kids in English. So the social hierarchy then became that every hierarchy looked every strata in the class looked up words, and eventually we ended up in a situation that everybody now learns everything in English without understanding any concepts. That is where we become now. So we become a country that can create coolies, be it tech coolies or be it in MBAs. That is what we create. We don't create people with original thought, first principle ideas, first principle thinking, but rather people who can memorize and regurgitate. Thanks, Shriji.
Yeah.
So here is an interesting observation that I had recently. In the last Republic Day celebrations in England, we had a room full of doctors and engineers and lawyers and programmers and entrepreneurs and all sorts of people who consider themselves to be the elites of the society. Right? And we were so happy about the Indian Republic Day, how great our constitution is, and how what a phenomenal success we've been. So I ran this straw poll as part of that celebration to say, okay, can you define, have you read the Constitution? Most of them said no. Have you read the preamble? Some said, well, I did, and most said they didn't. So I asked them, can you define what the framework wants our nation state to be? Most couldn't. And so the preamble of the Constitution says that India is constituted, we the people of India constitute India to be a sovereign democratic republic in the first version of the Constitution. And then, of course, later Indira Gandhi added the other two words, secular and socialist. So now, if you consider yourself an English speaker and you're confident that you have good language skills, here is the first paragraph of our Constitution: sovereign democratic republic. Take a moment and see whether you can define sovereign and republic. Most people in the room, a room full of doctors and engineers and entrepreneurs and lawyers and all sorts of elite Indians, could not define those two words. And those are the three words of the founding document of our nation in the first paragraph, let alone secularism and socialism. The initial debates for not adding secularism was it was a really complex and nebulous term. There are different variations of secularism: the American one, the French one, the Indian one, the German one. Different countries define secularism differently. So Ambedkar was insistent, and not just Ambedkar, a lot of the members of the Constituent Assembly was insistent that we should only use words that have clear definition. And we pride ourselves in having this 400-page document, which most of us cannot understand because it is written in a flowery legalese language where the civil servants were trying to show off how good they are in their, in their ability to master a foreign language and how good they can serve their colonial masters, right? So here we are in a country where even the elites can't define the three foundational words of our nation state. And how do we expect every member of our nation to understand what their rights are and what their responsibilities are? Are we living a lie? Are we living a lie when we say that we are a constitutional democratic republic? If majority of us can't understand the concepts and the ideas in the framing document, the time has come for us to really take a hard look and either translate the current document in a way that can understand, that most Indians can understand, and have a real attempt at getting the Samvidhan to every single citizen of the country, rather than building temples for it, rather than Ambedkar and all the members of the drafting committee would be shocked to see the way we are treating a constitutional document. A constitutional document is a framework document. It needs to be read, it needs to be understood, it needs to be debated, and if needed, it needs to be amended to suit the needs of the public. One of the reasons why Ambedkar did not want socialism to be added to the constitution, even though he considered himself to be a socialist, is the fact that he doesn't want the economic principle that a government should adopt be forced upon future generation. He said that should be determined at the ballot box, not written in a constitution that is immutable, and the only way to change that would be a supermajority, which is very difficult to get. So he believed that that burden should not be forced on the future generation, which is what we've done. Like, we've made the constitution from a intelligent legal framework that we need to debate and amend if needed, into a sacred text, which is where the problem is. And you see the opposition doing that. They bandy about their little copy of their constitution. I suppose we should now keep asking them, have you read the book? Can I ask you a few questions about the constitution? Can you explain what this principle means? Can you explain what? Let's look at the preamble. The preamble says equality of justice, economic, social, and so on and so forth. Some of them are contradicting. If you have reservation, you can ask for social justice, but that won't be justice in the true sense, because then you're saying you're preferring one group of people over the other. So all of these concepts were debated in the constitutional debates, right? So as a public of a nation that wants to be heard, that wants to be taken seriously, and that wants to be a developed nation, really needs to start having these conversations. So, as I mentioned before, we need a three-tier language strategy. Mother tongue should be the be-all and end-all of all languages in primary school. They can have other languages that are taught as secondary. For example, we can already start teaching Sanskritized Hindi and English as a second and third language in the primary school, but the primary language and the basic minimum requirement should be all subjects in primary school until the age of 10 or 11 should only be taught in the mother tongue, so that the languages survive. And state governments and central governments should invest a lot of money to make sure the language is live. By that, I mean it is alive, and new words are added, and new concepts are added, and all the research publications across the world are translated into the mother tongue so that it is accessible to all the students. And that is not difficult to do in the world of AI. If Slovenes with 2 million people can do that, I am sure the Tamils, the Kannadikas, the Telugus, and the Malayalis and the Bengalis and the Marathis and the Punjabis can also do it. We don't. It's not the just to put it in perspective. In a few years' time, Tamil Nadu will have the same GDP as Netherlands. So if the Dutch could do all of that in Dutch, I'm sure Tamils can do it with the same level of GDP. Fiji. So um, um, yes, I think we've covered most of what we discussed here, right? So
Yeah.
going back to the topic of our vision for what India is. If our ambition is a developed India, Viksit Bharat by 2047, we can only do it in our mother tongue. We need to look at how the Europeans have dealt with the multilingual problems. The European Union spends a lot of money translating all documents in between German, French, Spanish, Italian, and all sorts of different languages. When I used to live in Germany, I could take a driving test in Germany in any language, any European language. All the books were available of the theory test for the driving were available in all European languages. In any European state, you could take a driving test in any European language. And they put in a lot of effort. European Union has put in a lot of effort to preserve their languages. And each European state, like the Germans and the French and the Italians and the Swedes, and they spend a lot of money in keeping their languages alive. Whereas we in India, we pride ourselves, we mock people who speak different languages who live in our states, but we don't do anything to preserve our languages. So we are looking at the wrong. We know what is happening, but we have failed to see who the enemy is, and we failed to address the real problem. The fundamental real problem is lack of self-confidence, apathy, and electing people who have no idea about culture, linguistics, or anthropology. So those are the only three things we need to change to have a developed India that is self-confident and can regain its glory.
I love this last slide, first line. Great nations don't think in borrowed languages. If there's one takeaway from this presentation, this is the one. Great nations don't think in borrowed languages. See, there are many people, many of us, who probably may not be able to express themselves in a language that's not their mother tongue, because many, again, see, if you listen to people, right, you can kind of pick up what their mother tongue is, because they're thinking in their mother tongue and expressing it out in English. Very few of us have mastered the art of thinking in English and then expressing it in English. So these are all impediments. Many friends of mine who are non-Indian origin, they've said, I didn't know that this guy was this smart until I started seeing some of the work he described in a meeting in actual life. I mean, the person could bring out his, expertise in the product he was creating. He may not have been able to express it in the meeting as to what he thinks he wants to do with the product. So these are all impediments. I think you have made an excellent point. Viewers, this is very true. Ask yourself this question. When you start learning, your first words that you speak are in your mother tongue. Now, some of you might start asking, tough questions like, what about Tulu? There are Tulu-speaking regions in Karnataka. Are you then saying that you should disband Tulu, which is your mother tongue, but instead learn it in Kannada? These are things that can be worked out. First, the mindset has to change, that this is how I want to teach my child.
Exactly.
That is the takeaway here.
Indeed, there are Basque speakers in Spain. There are Sicilian speakers in Italy. They have figured out a way to keep these languages alive. We can. We are 1.4 billion people. And add to Sriji's point, something that I've noticed in the recent years is that I find young Indians who studied in Hindi medium or Tamil medium or Telugu medium or Kannada medium schools to have far more original ideas, particularly in tech, like in the field that Sri and I work in semiconductors. I increasingly notice that the English-speaking elites, the IITians and the BITSians, my alma mater, end up going to managerial roles, whereas the kids who learned it in their native mother tongue are the ones who go into R&D, are the ones who come up with original ideas, or the ones who have the ability to innovate. Like, this is the big difference between Sri generation and my generation. Sri, I'm assuming you read a lot of your own early education in either Tamil or Hindi, right?
Yes.
And I have
and Telugu also, yeah.
In Telugu also. So this is the point. So you see a slow degradation of our technological capabilities because we stopped learning, doing our primary school in our mother tongue, and just started memorizing and regurgitating, which will make it easy for us to pass GRE or GMAT or SATs or get an MBA. What point is having economics without culture or civilizational value? Is our entire purpose to be the butlers and the clerks of the world? We need to be creating innovators. We need to be creating C.V. Raman and Satyendra Nath Bose and Ramanujan, who all learned it in their own mother tongue. Bose learned it in Bengali. Raman and Ramanujan learned it in Tamil. But they had original thought that the world is still in awe of. Ask yourself this: what original ideas have we created through teaching our young children in English in the last 20-30 years?
Thank you so much. And viewers, I must mention that if you see this, if you have bought your copy and you have enjoyed it, this was Kumar's idea. It was Kumar who reached out to me and said, can we promote this through P Gurus? And then the rest, as they say, is history. We're continuing to evolve. We are continuing to develop new products that will appeal to you. Stay tuned. We are going to come up with more brilliant products. Thanks for all your help. And we are selling Sengols. They're still available for sale in United States and in India. We hope to sell it worldwide sometime very soon. We're still working on that network. Thank you so much, Kumar. This is a thought-provoking topic. And we both, being expats, we wanted to tell you that when we look for something from an employee, what he can do is what is more important than how he is going to express what he is going to do. The two are different. As a matter of fact, Kumar, you brought out another interesting thing. From 1995 to about 2006, about 12 years, my main R&D center was in Tamil Nadu. And most of the meetings used to take place in Tamil. I would explain, and these are complicated terms. Microsoft operating system, driver, handles, device drivers, also, and all new devices that they have never seen in their lives. In India, they didn't have USB ports at that point of time. So, but they picked up. We would not worry and say that, oh, I'm going to talk only in English, because my workforce was from the deep south, Kumar. They understood me when I spoke in Tamil rather than when I spoke in English. So
Indeed.
these are all things that are must have. Viewers, you may see, depending on where you grew up, you may or may not agree with what you're saying, but there's a big truth here that is actually staring us in the face. The new education policy sort of addresses this. It needs to gain ground, and we, as those who are working in industry, we're seeing various people from various walks of life. We can tell you that this is a very important point, because that makes the person rise to his or her best potential. Thank you so much, Kumar. Namaskar.
Yes. Just before we finish, just wanted to add one. Like, I couldn't string a sentence in English till I was about 20, right? So language is a tool. A foreign language is just a tool. Anyone could master it if and when it's needed, right? So understanding things is more important, and that is why we need to focus on. Well, Dhanyawad and Nandri.
Thank you so much. Namaskar.